Yeah, just what I want to talk about, a little bit of an update on some of the weeds research that NGA has done over the last year. Firstly, I'll talk about some weed control trials we've done in chickpeas, knockdown of wild oats, and residual control of some broadleaf weeds. And then I just want to talk quickly about some Sowthistle management work in fallow and some hot off the press summer grass control work that we have been doing. So starting off with wild oat control in chickpea. Well, I don't need to tell everybody here, but in general, we've got to use some sort of form of knockdown weed control in wild oats. The residual options we've got out there tend to leave some come through, and we can't let them go because with chickpeas you've got no crop competition, so you will end up with a messy paddock. Perhaps windrow burning will help to lessen that problem, but at the moment it's a big problem. We've got to do something. Unfortunately for us, there's a lot of Group A resistance out there. It seems to be getting worse all the time, and just makes wild oat control in chickpeas one hell of a challenge. And what we were trying to address is, can we tweak the spray applications we do to get a bit more consistency and to get things working better. So I'll just show you the results of the 4 trials we did this last winter. So the first one is a result at North Star. To explain my graph, excuse me, 25 weeds to the square metre is, all right. At this site, you can see that the verdict, particularly when it's applied at a 75 mil rate, has just not worked for us at this site. Rachel over there is the one who did the trial, so she could answer any questions about weeds and things, but 75 mil rate has done virtually nothing. 100 mil rate of verdict has given us a 50% reduction in plant number, but obviously that's not good enough. We've still got a lot of weeds there. We can add a bit of clethodim, so Status is a clethodim formulation. And you can see where we've added that low rate of Status, we've improved the results. So from there to there, or from there down to here, to give us, in this trial, the best result was from that mixture. We could use Status alone as another option. At that low rate, 250 mil rate, it's just not good enough. But going to a higher rate, we're getting a much better level of control. Likewise, if we add ammonium sulphate that we heard about before, at a 2% rate of liase there, it's improved the result down to a similar level to what we had with the 500 mil alone. The other thing we had in this trial was we wanted to look at this product factor, which is butroxydim, and why we had that was from reports from down south on ryegrass were that in some cases this was the last man standing, so that it was can we call it a resistance buster or a resistance delayer against ryegrass. We want to know, could it do the same thing against wild oats here? But looking at these results here, you can see factor, even going on at 180 grams, is just not giving us a good enough result. Certainly no improvement putting it in with the verdict or adding ammonium sulphate from it either. So in that trial, it was a dud. A second trial, we've almost had a identical result. So out at Mungindi, again a suspected FOP resistant site, verdict resistant site, and certainly our results would confirm resistance to verdict here, looking at that. Again, the factor just has not worked. It hasn't done anything. What has worked for us is, again, the mixtures of verdict with the low rate of Status, or adding liase to the Status. Unfortunately, we didn't have liase added to a 500 mil rate of Status. That would have been a nice one to look at, but We didn't have that treatment in the trial. Go to a third trial up near Dalby, and the difference here is the verdict is working, or not working quite as well as we'd want. We'd want to be getting close to 100% control, but it's doing a much better job than those other sites. Again, the mixtures are looking really good, as is the high rate of status. And again, even though not statistically significant, we've had that improvement by adding ammonium sulphate. So that's consistent, as in the relatively poor performance of the factor. And we go to our last site, which was done after everything else, so we modified our treatment list to some extent. But at this site, you can see very low weed number, but excellent control from the FOP product verdict. And you can't improve on almost perfect control. Status, you could say there's a bit of a rate response, no significant differences there. The only thing that stood out was the factor. We just had the high rate in there, it still didn't work. So pretty clear from these results that factor's not going to work on our wild oats up here, not from our experience. As far as adding mixtures or liaise go, you really can't improve on what the verdict low rate was giving you on its own, so it's not going to tell us any more. So key points there is the most consistent over the 4 trials was that clethodim haloxyfop, so the verdict status mix for us. It did work. If you're going to use clethodim alone, you want to go to the 500 ml rate. Unfortunately, except for that last trial where everything just about worked, we didn't have the 500 ml plus the ammonium sulphate in there, which would be my suggestion that what you'd go for. Butoxidum alone, certainly, I don't think we'll be looking at that product again up here. And certainly what I didn't mention was that ammonium sulphate boost we had. They were all in what I would consider good quality water. The Dalby trial, the Bowenville trial, was sprayed in rainwater. We still got a liaise response with clethodim in every single trial. So, yeah. So moving on, residual weed control in chickpea. We did 9 trials last winter. Some of them we didn't get results in. We didn't get rain, we didn't get weed germinations. We had quite a few trials on wild oat management. I'm not going to present any of those results. The best treatments were only giving us about an 80% reduction in wild oat numbers. So the residuals were giving us, in general, between 50 to 80% control, and we couldn't improve on that with what we had, particularly last season. And I'm sure at times we can get better than that, but you wouldn't want to rely on getting it. You're going to need some sort of knockdown happening as well. I will show you a result on Mexican poppy, and we had another trial I'm not going to show on climbing buckwheat as well. But we did have quite an interesting result on windmill grass. So this is a trial out at Baradine. And what we have here is a population of about 7 windmill grass to the square metre. When this trial was sprayed, there were tussocks at the site from the previous summer, so it was sprayed in, you probably can't read it, but sprayed in early May. There were tussocks at the site. We've put our herbicides down, what I call IBS, incorporated by sowing herbicides. They were sprayed on top of these tussocks. The farmer came in and planted, and then that same day we came back and we put these PSPE treatments of simazine, turbine or balance on. In these cases, the outlook put on earlier, then followed by balance. So it wasn't a tank mix, it was followed by it. What we found quite interesting here was none of these treatments on their own are doing anything significant at all. Balance was giving us a 50% reduction in numbers in the spring, so this was a count done in October, about 4.5 months after the products had been applied, so they'd gone through the winter and started regrowing. What Balance appeared to be doing was stopping any new seedlings germinating. It wasn't killing the tussocks there from last year. They were starting to regrow. A bit stunted, but were regrowing. Where we had put on, in particular, Box of Gold, then followed it with Balance, we were killing those tussocks. They were trying to regrow, but they were these stunted little tiny things like that, and probably 2/3, 3/4 of them were dead. So that combination was doing something. It wasn't a tank mix, but somehow the Box of Gold was preconditioning the plants, and I've got no explanation as to why, but that's what was happening. So the picture doesn't show it very clearly, but up here we've got this pretty horrible chickpea crop. These green patches are actually wild oats coming through, not much crop competition. Down here is our untreated, and you can see that reddish tinge is all the seed heads of the windmill grass coming up. And just I probably visited that site a week after these pictures were taken, and it was just looked like a crop of windmill grass there, because the chickpeas weren't very competitive. I alluded to the Mexican poppy trial that Rachel did again. What I wanted to show here, we've been trying to do trials on Mexican poppy for years and couldn't find a site properly, but we got one, and quite a good one. So about 18 Mexican poppy to the square metre. If you look here, Balance giving us about a 50% reduction in plant number. Our Balance simazines, Balance turbines are down here around to the 75% reduction. Nothing giving us 100%. The two giving us the best were experimental products that I'm not allowed to name here. They're not registered yet, but you can see from the stats there was a lot of variability, but it was pretty clear that these products here were doing a damn good job. So hopefully something coming along, if the companies can persevere and get these products registered, that we can actually name in the future. Lastly, I want to talk about these knockdown trials. So I'll start off talking about the Sowthistle result we had at Mullaley. So this was a site where it's known that glyphosate wasn't going to work very well on the Sowthistle, we'll put it that way. And sure enough, we look at our results here. So what I've got here is the end of the yellow bar, so about 12 weeds to the square metre. We're talking 76 days, so 2.5 months after application. The Sowthistle were big rosettes starting to elongate when they got sprayed. The yellow bar is this treatment on its own, so untreated was that many. When we've put a paraquat double knock at 7 days, 2 litres, over the top of that, it's reduced that number down to about 1 or a little bit over 1 to the square metre. So the paraquat's done a pretty good job. Glyphosate alone, we've had 3 rates, and you can see a lot of survivors there. And certainly it was very hard to pick the difference between untreated and the lower rates of glyphosate at that site. What has worked is basically where we've put a phenoxy on and then double knocked it. Just about all those treatments have given us excellent control. None of them were giving total control with the single knock, but when we've double knocked it, you've got to be happy with these ones here, zeros, essentially. The odd one out was where we mixed the sharpen, so the BASF people won't want me to say this, but it certainly sped up the burn down of the things, but leaving it out to 76 days, it regrew. So, and if I look down the bottom, we've got a Nuquat balance treatment. So that's a tank mix of those 2 products, which was then followed up by a second Nuquat, and you can see that's also given us no survivors and residual control. So that is the lead on to the next trial, which is some pretty recent data sprayed at the end of December. Again, a trial Rachel has done down near Moree. And what we'd like to say, Feathertop Rhodes grass, which I've just confirmed with Rachel, sort of hand-sized, tilled when it was sprayed. About 38 plants to the square metre in our untreateds. And what has worked? Verdict at a 150 mil rate, on its own, only giving us a 50% reduction. If we've double knocked it, it's come right down to only about 1 or 2 plants to the square metre, so pretty good control. If we've gone to 300 mil of verdict on those biggish weeds, it's done an excellent job. On its own, leaving about 1 plant to the square metre, double knocked, cleaned the trial up. Glyphosate alone, only giving us, what's that, maybe 30-40% reduction in plant number. Double knock it, you've still got over 10 plants to the square metre, so it wasn't good enough, and those ones there were quite healthy too. Paraquat on its own, not doing a lot. This is 2 paraquats to give you about a 50% reduction. Even the higher rate, well, the higher rate's worse according to this. What did work was this Balance Nuquat mixtures. So 50 grams of Balance at this site has given us a very good reduction. Double knocked, only 1 or 2 survivors, so similar to the low rate of verdict. The higher rate of Balance Nuquat has given us 100% control when we double knocked it, and close to it on its own. So very good. We also were trying out other spikes or additives to paraquat to see, would anything work? And certainly it would only appear Balance was the only one really giving us a significant improvement. So just a photo of that site. There's your Balance Nuquat, and it was lovely and clean compared to, well, that's actually a product we were trying out that's not registered, but essentially it was an untreated. This product just made it turn yellow. So, but you can see some of the other treatments in the background. The good ones, as in something like that or over here, would either be another Balance, maybe the lower rate, or a verdict plot. And everything else is sort of giving us a lot of survivors. We go further south, so again, pretty hot off the press. So these were only sprayed at the end of January. So a trial on liverseed grass at Mary's Mount, so down on the Liverpool Plains, or just to the west of the Liverpool Plains. And what have we got here? We've got our untreated, very big population, 60 plants to the square metre. Paraquat alone, doing an excellent job. So you can see anything with paraquat in has done a really good job at this site on the liverseed grass. Bit of a worry here, the 1 litre rate of glyphosate letting a hell of a lot of survivors through, even when double knocked. The 2 litre rate of glyphosate, fine. So we're perhaps getting a little bit of tolerance happening there. So verdict, doing a reasonable job. I look at those numbers and you think it's not working at all, but it seemed to be very, very slow at this site. And we were counting alive plants, not healthily growing plants. So Anthony actually did another count yesterday, but I don't have those results yet. So I think with a little bit more time, you'd find those verdict numbers would be pretty much down here as well. But what I wanted to show was how well Nuquat has worked here. And here's our balanced Nuquat, same rate. So you got that comparison to there. It's damn good. They're both significantly better than the control, is what the asterisks mean. Same site, we also had barnyard grass, so it was a pretty weedy paddock. And what we've got here again is just an excellent result from the double knock, the second application of Nuquat against barnyard grass. So if you look at the yellow bars, you're talking these treatments on their own, and you can see it would appear we've got resistance here to the 1 litre rate of glyphosate, 2 litre rate doing something, but not as good as you'd like. The verdict, again, appearing very slow. Well, I'd like to see the second count though before I condemn that. What's working? 100 grams of balanced and Nuquat, doing a great job again. So, it's there. So, putting all those results together, we've actually had this balanced Nuquat treatment in trials for several years now, and thought, let's have a look at them, because in those trials, well, certainly on that Feathertop trial, we were clearly getting synergism there. What I hadn't shown you is what balance does alone. As a knockdown on these grasses, it yellows them, but it doesn't kill them. So what I did, I went through all of our trial results where we had that balanced Nuquat mixture, and I'll show you what we've got. So this is on grass weeds. This is what Nuquat alone was doing. Now the Nuquat rate varied in trials. Basically in the Feathertop and the Windmill grass trials, we've used 2.4 litres per hectare. In the trials on the other weeds, we've used 1.6 litres per hectare. So, and what you can see here is, in some cases, certainly against the liver seed grass, against the button grass, and one trial against the ornless barnyard grass, the paraquat on its own has worked really quite well. Against the chloris species, so your windmill grass and your feathertop, the higher rate of paraquat, pretty ordinary, it's not great. So that was paraquat on its own. This is where we've added 100 grams of balance to the same rate of paraquat. Where I've got the asterisks is where this balance paraquat treatment is performing significantly better than the paraquat on its own. And you can see in 8 of the 11 comparisons we've had a significant improvement in efficacy. One of those other ones on the button grass, the difference wasn't significant, but it's clearly there. 2 trials, we haven't seen any improvement. If anything, we've seen there was no significant differences, but it's come down, if anything. And I've got no explanation as to why it hasn't worked at those 2 sites, but the weight of numbers, 8 out of 11 have a significant improvement, is saying, hey, there's something there that we need to look at this a bit more carefully. Where we have come back and put another double knock, so another paraquat on top of that 7 to 10 days later, or anywhere between 5 and 10 days later, we've now had 100% weed control in 9 of those 11 comparisons. So what I think we've got here is another tool to combat some of these grasses in fallow. If, bearing in mind the residual, you get out of balance, and when you might be able to use it and when you might not. However, you might want to ask what it's doing on some of the other weeds. So we've got here some trials we've done. We've had it in 6 trials where we've looked at Fleabane control. Now I'm not talking little Fleabane, I'm talking big flowering Fleabane that's reshot after the head has been through, the big hard to kill stuff. And again, the same colours. So your blue is your paraquat alone. So at Reb Bob's site, everything worked. We had a great result. Whereas at the Boggabri site, nothing did a thing. So that's what we get when we're trying to control big Fleabane. When we look at these other sites though, there's generally an improvement. And certainly the 2 sprays of paraquat has given us a pretty good result at some of these sites. But what we've got here is not, in none of those sites did adding the balance give us a significant improvement compared to what the paraquat alone was doing. So we were not getting the same effect on the broadleaf weeds as we saw on the grasses. So key points, yes, certainly balance plus paraquat. Very promising on grasses. We need to investigate it further, and if there's chemical company people here, please tell us what's happening, because there's something going on. And it's, you know, against particularly these chloris weeds, we need every option we can get, because we want to protect verdict. So we can, if we've got something else we can rotate with, great. And yeah, the other thing was just that generally poor performance of paraquat alone against chloris species. Though I did have Moree Conway in the earlier session, and he mentioned that he reckons he's better off using the lower rate of paraquat against feathertop up north. He gets a better result out of a 1.6 litre rate than 2.4, but that's the first time I've heard that. So, and yeah, lastly, just to thank GRDC for funding us, because yeah, without GRDC, nothing would happen. So thank you. And yeah, that's it.